Isaiah Jackson enters restricted free agency. So does Enrique Freeman. And Quentin Jackson plus Tony Bradley has his team option exercise. The Pacers offseason is rolling, and we have a lot to discuss on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, the offseason is here and rolling and going crazy. Lots of stuff is happening. Tony Bradley, his team option is exercised. Restricted free agents, they're happening. What is going on? When is Myles Turner going to sign? So much to get to today, including things that I got wrong, and I want to dive into why I either got them wrong, potentially, or explained them wrong in practice when it comes to Tony Bradley and what it could mean for the rest of the Pacers offseason. Shout out to one of my best childhood friends, Jake Bannon, getting married this weekend. Saw a ton of people there that were podcast listeners. So the Egan's, Mike, Sam, the Westlakes, good to meet you. Good to see you. Okay, let's talk about this. Isaiah Jackson got a qualifying offer. I did not expect that at all. Neither did Yosi when he was on here yesterday and we were previewing the Pacers offseason. So did Enrique Freeman and Quentin Jackson, two-way players. We'll talk about those two later. The reasoning I had with Isaiah Jackson is a qualifying offer, which is something required for teams to submit to players to send them to restricted free agency, is actually a real contract offer. Technically, it's a 1-year offer at a certain amount set by the CBA based on where you're drafted and some other factors. And so Jackson's that he just got is a 1-year, $6.4 million offer. Isaiah Jackson has that sitting on the table for him right now. Now, I thought, and some people I would talk to leading up to free agency, we all agreed that he would probably just take that. Given his injury, right, it's hard to project what he'll be worth. He might have to rebuild his value. Some people have sided, including me, Saddiq Bey, signing his 2-year cheapo deal with the Wizards after he tore his ACL a year ago in March to rebuild his value. Obviously, he was going to miss a season, but that was, part of the thinking is just like that's kind of how this has gone for young players before. And then the Pacers offered it today. So I have to, put a hand up and say, my bad. I thought, kind of clearly, I said shocked on Twitter after that they would not offer this, right, to him. So let's start with this. Yes, I was wrong, clearly wrong. I had multiple people around in adjacent to whatever you want to say, the NBA, message me on Sunday and be like, I'm surprised I did this. And that made me feel better about being surprised, even though I got it wrong. And I wanted to figure out kind of why. And I think one reason that is challenging is figuring out exactly what Isaiah Jackson should be worth in free agency, right? Because he is hidden under the subtext of talking about his contract and where he should go with the Pacers. I keep talking about injuries, right? He's hurt. What does that mean for his projection this year? And that's a lot of what this conversation is boiled down to. But the other part of the conversation is that he's good, right? He's a good player, and that should be brought up. Even last year, right? He's efficient, over 60% from the field the last 2 years, such a mobile defender, really improved his rebounding last year, albeit he only played 5 games in the season. But, he's a good player. He's a promising young player. Other teams, in theory, especially young teams, would have had interest in Isaiah Jackson in free agency. And so that's where my previous points about him do come short, right? Is that if he is good, and there are look at what the Wizards did last year with Saddiq Bey. Why wouldn't the Wizards or the Hornets, who have no centers right now, or any young team that isn't projected to be good or competitive this year, why would they not want Isaiah Jackson? And if there's multiple teams that want the guy, he might be worth more than the minimum, right? That was my projection based off his injury history. Perhaps he's worth a little more than that. When I originally went to my back of napkin cap sheet just to do tax math before I updated my full thing, I penciled in Isaiah Jackson for $3 million, right? Which is barely above his minimum, which is why I eventually said maybe a 1+1 other player option. I'm rambling and talking too much about myself. Why did the Pacers actually do this? What would actually be the reason? Well, one could be that his market is actually strong enough, if there are other teams that would actually have wanted him, that $6.4 million isn't the end of the world to the Pacers. I mean, I would think that's a lot, especially for a team very conscious of the budget. But if his market is strong enough or teams are interested enough in him, who knows? And so what I wanted to do today, and why I'm recording this later than I hoped, is I tried to go back through the history of all 50, whatever, as many as you can find. It's impossible to find all of them, but as many Achilles tear data as you can have in the NBA or torn ACLs to figure out how that impacted player contracts. And this is such a unique overlap for Isaiah Jackson, where he's entering restricted free agency. That's already a rare part of it. He did not get a rookie scale extension, right? Like Markelle Fultz, 8 games into his 4th season, tears his ACL in Orlando, but he signed the rookie extension before that, so he's out, right? Saddiq Bey last year was so late in the season that he was going to miss a whole year. Isaiah Jackson might be ready for opening night next year. I don't know exactly when, but like he has such a unique overlap of when the injury happened, what his current contract time is, how old he is, that there's not really like ever in NBA history a comp of what a team was willing to offer a player in this situation, right? Like Jabari Parker got a ton of money after his ACL tear. He got like $40 million from the Bulls, but he was drafted way higher and it's ACL instead. And like he tore it at a different time. It's just, there's not a good comp of this injury at this time for this player. I don't mean like recently. I mean like maybe ever in the NBA. And so a reason that I could have been wrong and why the Pacers would have been willing to offer this is that my estimate of Isaiah Jackson's market and or his value was wrong. And he might be worth more or closer to that $6.4 million value. And then if you're Isaiah Jackson and you have that on the table, well, if you're getting, 3 for 15 or something, then signing one for 6.4 makes less sense, right? You're trying to maximize your total earnings. And so that is a potential error on my part. And that gets to why the Pacers would have offered this is if Jackson would have potentially gotten offers in that range, and the Pacers want him because, like I said at the top, before we got into all the injury and cap stuff, he's good. He's a good player, right? They traded up to get him. He fits well in their system. He's developed every year. He is good. If they want to keep him and they're willing to pay that price, then they should make him a restricted free agent because they get the right of first refusal. They can max contracts from their teams. Now, with players at this skill level, typically restricted free agency isn't kind to them. Teams don't want to tie up their cap sheet too much on a guy like him. So it might actually help the Pacers with his value too, if that is his value. And so, look, the Pacers aren't dumb. That's the other thing to think about when they do something that is surprising to me or makes like I got wrong is they're not dumb. Like they thought through this. They have more information than all of us, right? There's a reason they did it. And so, one, I think this increases the chances that Isaiah Jackson is back with the Pacers next year. And two, I think that they're comfortable with his health status and what he might fetch on the market. And this might make that right in line with what they're comfortable with because it might actually deter offers from other teams. So that is my summary of the current situation with Isaiah Jackson. So he's a restricted free agent now. What that means is that if he signs a contract with another team, the Pacers can match it and bring him back. That's that right of first refusal I brought up earlier. The match rights on him are helpful there. And this, I think, increases again, if he's restricted, increases the chances he specifically is back. We'll talk about 2 other restricted guys later. So we'll see where this lands. But the Pacers wouldn't have done this if they weren't comfortable with whatever Jackson's value would be. And it's probably closer to $6.4 million than I thought. The other part of this to me is they sent out all 3 of their possible qualifying offers. Enrique Freeman got one and Quentin Jackson got one. If you count that Ray J. Dennis already has a 2-way and they drafted Taylor Peter, there's 4 guys in the mix for 2-way slots now. In theory, Freeman and Jackson could sign those right now, but they have different qualifying offers. Freeman's is another 2-way. Jackson's is actually a standard contract with like a very, very, very small amount of money guaranteed. If they sign them, they would be waived immediately. And the Pacers know, and the players know, and their agencies know what is going on with that situation. But that's the other part of even Isaiah Jackson's qualifying offer that's relevant here is like Quentin Jackson could, in theory, just make himself a tiny amount of money right now by signing his qualifying offer. But that'd be stupid because he could go through summer league, go through camp, whatever, prove that he's deserving of a 2-way or a roster spot and get more money, right? This is a relationship thing where you wait out the process and figure out the best situation for a player and team. And that is the other part of this thing with Isaiah Jackson is the Pacers wouldn't have offered him the qualifying offer if they knew he would just sign it instantly. And they didn't want that to happen. If they're okay with that, then even better, right? So it's obviously a relationship part of it too. There's trust between all the parties involved. And so, at least I'd imagine, right? So that is why I think I got that wrong. And the other part of this it makes sense is if they want him back, this does make sense, right? So I would imagine this increases the chances of an Isaiah Jackson return, and he's a good player. That's a good reason to do it. I think it also increases the chance of a return at a price higher than I thought, and it was very hard to find real contract comps, but good for Isaiah Jackson. We'll see where this lands and what it means for the Pacers cap sheet when any deal is officially signed, if it actually happens. The other two restricted guys got qualifying offers as well, Enrique Freeman and Quentin Jackson. We'll get into a little more detail on that. Then we'll talk about Tony Bradley, also kind of surprised me, kind of not. I'll explain why I explained that wrong. And then so much more, even more on Myles Turner today on Locked On Pacers. Before we get into any of that, we need to talk about FanDuel. Summer sports, they're in full swing, and whether you are all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every single game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Many people have been using FanDuel to track their favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, it's fast to pay out, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you are a part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, my gosh, so much is going on in the NBA. That's what happens on that 29th deadline of team options and player options and qualifying offers. And James Harden and LeBron James. And oh my goodness, what is happening? Locked On Lakers, Locked On Clippers. I have so many more suggestions later in the show for your second listen today. Okay, thing two that happened, much more subtle. Fans did not really have any uproar about this, and good job, you shouldn't. Qualifying offers for Enrique Freeman and Quentin Jackson. They are restricted free agents. If the Pacers want them, they can easily keep them. That's great. I think that signals to me between those two, Taylor Peter and Ray J. Dennis, perhaps some competition for two-way spots, right? Who do they want to get the last ones and why? Last year, people were wondering about these two. Remember that? It was like a big deal when Quentin Jackson got his two-way and Tristan Newton got his. And is Enrique Freeman going to get one, or is he going to get a standard spot? Who else could get a two-way? Remember that debate after Summer League? How about some competition again? So those two are restricted free agents who could be back with the Pacers on a two-way. Obviously, the kid they drafted, Taylor Peter, could get one. Reggie Dennis is currently signed to one because he signed a 2-year two-way last year. So we'll see where this goes, right? It might depend on what they need. If they need extra center help post-free agency, if they need extra point guard help with Haliburton out post-free agency. This just suggests to me that competition is coming. That doesn't mean that's guaranteed to be the case. Who knows what these players actually want, but I'd imagine that both Jackson and Freeman are happy with that outcome. Go give a chance to prove yourselves, show why the Pacers have liked you for all this time. There's not much to that. That will be more developing as the offseason goes on or Summer League begins, or if Peter just doesn't look great. We'll see. Okay, the other thing that happened on Sunday, Tony Bradley, who I said, but let me explain why I got this wrong, but let me get through all this. Well, I said, although decline his team option. He had a team option for $2.94 million for the coming season. He signed that 2-year deal back in March with the Pacers. They picked it up, but let me explain this whole thing. So Tony Bradley's contract for the coming season, that option the Pacers picked up, is completely non-guaranteed. So what I kept saying is, Tony Bradley, he's a minimum salary center. If they decline the team option, they can bring him back on a minimum deal. They can still waive him on his new deal and bring him back on a minimum deal. So I still think if Tony Bradley is actually on the Pacers opening night roster this coming season, that he will not be on this $2.9 million deal. He'd be waived and then re-signed on a cheaper deal, which sounds confusing, but let me explain to you why they would do what they just did, right? So I'm going to use a trade that just happened as an example. I hope I don't get this totally wrong. So Mark Williams got traded from the Hornets to the Suns, and the Suns had to send back matching salary to the Hornets. And lo and behold, look at this. Here's Vasilije Micic, who has a non-guaranteed salary for this coming season on their team. So to make the trade legal, the Suns are over the second apron. They have to send back equal salary or more to Charlotte. So what they did is they revised basically Vasilije Micic's contract to have $8 point whatever million guaranteed, the amount required for them to trade for Mark Williams and then made that trade. They sent they sent Micic back to Charlotte, and then they got Mark Williams, right? So what the option they had with a non-guaranteed or partially guaranteed contract is guaranteeing part of it to make this trade. If you go back to last year's Hornets trade with the Knicks, that crazy, chaotic Karl Towns, Julius Randle, what's going on trade, 3 players went from the Knicks to the Hornets, and they got their contracts guaranteed in that trade because those players getting more portion of their money guaranteed made that trade legal. So with Tony Bradley here on his non-guaranteed contract, pretend there's I'm making this completely up, but pretend there's a hypothetical trade for the Pacers where they send away a player for a player they want, but the salary difference between those 2 players is less than Tony Bradley's salary. What they could now do is they could guarantee the difference in salary between those players as a portion of Tony Bradley's contract, include him in the trade, and make it legal. And then Bradley gets more money, so he's happy with that. The Pacers make a trade they're happy with. Like, it's a win-win for all the parties who have moving parts involved, besides that nobody loves being traded, right? So that is the reason you would do this as the Pacers, is whether you want Tony Bradley back or not, there's no downside. If you think he stinks and you don't even plan on having him in camp or whatever, go through the offseason, see what options are there. If nothing materializes, just waive him. There goes the money, right? No problem. No harm, no foul. It's off the books. If they do want him or they want to bring him into camp and let him fight for a roster spot, great. They can do that too. Bring him into camp. And if he's awesome, say, Tony, here's the deal. Would you like to? We're going to cut you, but we're going to re-sign you. You get money anyway. You're on the team, right? Players and agents know what's going on. They're not dumb, right? They're not going to be like, this is stupid. You screwed me out of whatever, $700,000. Like, they know what's going on. They're not dumb. So that is why they did this. So what I said was wrong in that I said that they would decline the option because his minimum is less than the option. What I meant was, if they wanted, the subtext of that is, if they want Tony Bradley, he will be on a minimum deal. And that is still true. It's just the way they're going to get there, if it happens, is now different. And this just unlocks actual, legitimately real trade flexibility for the next however long they decide to keep Tony Bradley around. And then they can maneuver from there. But if, right now it's so easy to say, okay, instead of 10 players, they have 11 players and they're at $168 million of salary instead. And they're $19.7 million from the tax instead of 22. And okay, that sounds like they're closer to the tax. But again, they could just waive him with no penalty at any time, right? His money's just completely off the books at that point. So picking up the team option was a zero downside risk thing to do that opens up the Pacers some flexibility. And they still might just have no Tony Bradley money on their books next season. So that is why I got that wrong in my explanation to you, but why it makes a ton of sense what the Pacers did, even though, that one's easy to explain. Everybody that I talked to about, it's like, yeah, that makes total sense. The Jackson one people still had trouble with, but the Pacers wouldn't have done it without good reason. And that is your update of the day for day 0-ish of free agency. The 30th is day 1. So again, technically, by picking up that Bradley option, their tax space is cut into, but really not functionally, because they could just waive him. But I would say this. I would say that this kind of dance with Bradley and the qualifying offer going out to Isaiah Jackson probably decreases the chances of Thomas Bryant being back on the Pacers next year, unless he's willing to take an unguaranteed minimum still and wait it out and see. Even in that case, they might just wait it out and not even sign him to that right away. So that's the only real tangible update. People asked if this meant anything for Myles Turner. No, I don't think so at all. These are reserve level players. I think they know that. I think the Pacers know that. And I'll talk about Myles Turner in a second. Outside of that, really no huge ripple effects for the Pacers. It does just give them a little more flexibility and decision-making power as they go into free agency. So the biggest change mentally for me is I already thought it made sense, as I explained, for Isaiah Jackson to return to the Pacers. Now I think it's even more likely that he's back on the team next year. And then the trickle-down effect from that is who's their third center and what does it mean for the rest of their spending, whatever his deal comes in at. But they know they have projections. That's how this works. And the way that free agency changed in the NBA is you can negotiate with your own guys the second the finals are over. The Pacers right now going into this have a pretty good idea of what it would take to keep Isaiah Jackson on their team. They could, in theory, already signed him and Myles Turner and lots of other guys, right? So that is the current status of Pacers free agency with the moves they made on what I am calling effectively day 0 of free agency. The exact contracts for Turner and Jackson still unknown. Do they need a point guard? What are they going to do with Cam Jones? Who knows? We'll break that all down later as it comes. Let's talk about one more Myles Turner related thing that I've been asked about a lot that I need to get through. And then it's time for the real shebang. Players will be signing. It's June 30th. It's going to be crazy tomorrow night. Let's get right to it. Talking a little bit more about Myles Turner. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Jabari Smith got a ton of money from the Houston Rockets. That's a guy in Ben Mathurin's draft class, a rookie scale extension. Keep an eye on all of those, obviously, for some reason or another. Malik Beasley being investigated in a gambling probe for stuff that happened when he was with the Bucks. Locked On Pistons, where Beasley played last year, and Locked On Rockets for more on Jabari Smith. Your places to go for a second. Listen to hear more about that right before free agency. That could shift the tides of what might happen and who might go where. Crazy story that Kuka Hill of Locked On Pistons will have more on. Okay, Myles Turner. A thing I haven't really touched on this podcast that I've been asked about now enough that I feel like I should talk about it with Myles Turner is I've talked very binarily about, if they signed him to this or if he left or, what that means for the tax and blah, 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 and why they should want him back and why Turner maybe financially wants to be back. And then people chime in quietly and say, well, they could just sign and trade him. Yes, that is technically legally something they could do. So one thing that I think people don't realize is that there's 4 parties involved in a sign and trade. The player being signed and traded, the team trading him, the team receiving him, and then the actual return of stuff that they're getting. That's how, obviously that's similar to a lot of trades, but when there's a contract involved that doesn't have to be signed, it's a little different because if pretend hypothetically that Myles Turner is being signed and traded and the destination he's going to isn't somewhere he wants to go, why would he sign the contract, right? So it's basically him picking his destination in free agency because of all those specific parameters. It's hard to get good returns in sign and trades. Like the Sixers got just Josh Richardson for Jimmy Butler, right? It's just, for example, there's a lot of sign and trades. If you go back and you're like, that's it. That's all they got. Think about what the Bulls got for DeRozan last year. And that's just how it is, right? People always go, that's such a low return. Yeah, that's reality, right? It's that or nothing in a lot of cases. So with Turner, yes, it is legal for the Pacers to sign and trade him. Once again, ask yourself, what are they getting back that's as good as Myles Turner, right? That is always where the challenges are because they have to figure out what else they would need. And if they make a trade, they still need a center. How are they getting that center? And if you say they're getting the center in the trade, so there's a team out there that has a good center they're willing to give up, but they're getting Myles Turner back. Is it a fit thing? So it's just kind of complicated and complex how all that would even make sense just because of the Pacers' needs and what the other team would apparently be offering. If the other team has hey, we have this young center, but we want to get older, I guess maybe the Pacers would sniff around on that if they liked the value enough. But it's very hard to put together a sign and trade involving Turner that actually makes sense unless it's financially imbalanced in a crazy way. Because the other part of it is, it's not very hard. I'm probably overstating this. It's somewhat challenging to put together such a sign and trade. With the new salary matching rules, unless the Pacers are trading Turner into cap space, which again would basically only be Brooklyn, maybe Detroit could get there if they lose Malik Beasley, but it sounds like Alexander Walker or Karis LeVert's been reported there. If they sign those guys, they don't have space. Whatever, I'm rambling. The Pacers would still, pending Myles Turner's first-year salary, have to take back something between $21 and $23 million back for him at minimum, right? Just to make the trade legal, for the other team to be sending out enough to take in whatever Turner's first-year salary would be, right? So that already also puts the Pacers with more tax concerns. So do they want the player they're getting enough to be close to the tax again? Do they want to deal with that? Is the assets right? Does this actually make them better? So it's not impossible. Theoretically, for all of you asking, yes, there are ways the Pacers could sign and trade Myles Turner. Is it easy? No. Is the value easy to determine? No. And the Pacers would run into the same problem of hey, they need a center on their team now, right? So how they would work through that would be functionally very challenging. And so I'm not saying to rule that out, and I'm going to be a little more tactful with how I describe things because both of the transactions I've already talked about on the show, I got wrong in explaining them to you already. So if I've lost your trust with this stuff, I understand it. But it's challenging. And I always say that about sign and trades. They're usually a challenging thing to have happen, and that's why the returns tend to be low because a lot of times sign and trades that do happen is it's this or nothing, for example. So I don't think the Pacers would end up in that situation given the cap space reality of the NBA. But alas, you just never know how this stuff could go. The sands are shifting in the league. Lots of movement already. Well, movement-ish. Guys getting stuff done and moving. So, yes, to sum it up, a Myles Turner sign and trade is possible. However, much more difficult than people give it credit for. Like, how are you getting a center back? Or are you just taking assets back to trade for a center in the future someday? Like, that's a very risky proposition. Next season is still a thing that the Pacers have to wade through. Okay, that's the end of that part. I have to say something else about Bennedict Mathurin that apparently is not getting through to people, and I might just be saying it poorly. I talk about his future similar to what I've said from some of the players on the show and how he might be a central figure of the Pacers offseason. That is strictly financially based, right? He is extension eligible. He will be a free agent next year. There's a reason the Pacers would consider it. His role might change the season, time for evaluation, right? If he plays well, they could have to pay him more. All that stuff is all true. That's all financial discussions. I'm not saying all this stuff about the Pacers considering trades or not extending him because I don't think he's good. I do think Ben Mathurin is very good, right? He won them a finals game this season, right? Now, he wasn't that consistent the whole series. Ben Mathurin is very good. Like, if they keep him, there's good reason to do so. It's not a lock one way or the other. It's just because of his free agency timing is an important part of their offseason. It has nothing to do with him not being good, right? And that's why the Pacers have to evaluate their spending and evaluate what they want to do with him now to get ahead of this because of what their future could look like. It has nothing to do with his ability. This happens all the time with rookie scale situations where you have to evaluate fit and what that means. Go back to Sabonis and remember how awkward his rookie scale extension stuff came for the Pacers. He came up to us in media and said, they hadn't gotten a deal done. I know how they feel about me, and they've revealed that and blah, blah, blah. And it was like, whoa, this is some shots at the team. And then they got something done, and then it was an awkward fit with Turner for years and years and years, and it was fine, like financially, but also they had like tax issues that COVID year where no one could have seen the cap not jumping very much. And I'm rambling about stuff that doesn't matter, but like the salary cap became a big factor for those Pacers teams, and that extension got awkward, and fit was a key part of it too. No, obviously Sabonis was better thought of. I don't know. Sabonis was thought of quite highly at that time, maybe not higher than Mathurin now. And then he became a starter very soon after, or at about around that time. But you just have to think about all the dynamics at play and what it means for your team long term. It doesn't mean the player isn't good or isn't deserving of A, money, B, chances on their current team, C, more opportunity on their current team. There's a very good case for Mathurin to get all of those things. It's just, does it make sense? What do the Pacers have to think about with their future as a basketball team and on the cap sheet? That is what that discussion is about, less so about anything specific. And now I feel like I have effectively discussed the Pacers offseason. Restricted free agency for Freeman and both Jacksons. Tony Bradley has a contract. Unrestricted free agency for Thomas Bryant, James Johnson, and Myles Turner. And they're off. 6 p.m. on Monday is the day that teams can officially start signing with other teams. And that's when things get moving and grooving. But, like last year, Obi Toppin, his deal with the Pacers became announced on the 30th, like right before 6 p.m. You never know when Turner or anyone who was a Pacers free agent from last season could come through. You never know when players could move around and switch teams. And we will break whatever happens down right here on Locked On Pacers. If nothing happens, great. We'll pivot and talk about something else. There's always something free agency related that can be discussed as the markets move, as teams shift. And I can't wait to break it all down for you guys right here. Hopefully, I have explained why I was wrong in a way that makes you understand why I thought the way I did. But thank you guys so much for listening today. If you have any questions, if you're watching on YouTube, comment down below. If you're listening on an audio feed, tweet at me at Tony R. East. This podcast, or I can be found on Blue Sky under the same handle. This podcast is at Locked On Pacers on Twitter and under the same Locked On Pacers handle on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for listening today. We will see you very soon.